Welcome to the Amari Purple Talk on-time spoiler review. I'm Richard Cole, your imagination soloist, and it's out on time, A Princely Life in Funk by Morris Day with David Ritz. This will be a spoiler review, so if you haven't had a chance to purchase the book yet, or if you've purchased the book and haven't had a chance to read it, or if you're halfway done with it, so then by all means, finish the book first, then listen to this podcast. Other than that, there is a non-spoiler review that I have on episode 8 of Amari Purple Talk. So if you want to start there before diving into the book, then do that. Otherwise, we're going to go into some details, folks. So, like I said, the book is out. I got it October 8th and just kind of read through it. Kind of taking some times when I don't normally read to kind of fill in the gaps so I can have this book finished in time for the review. So I completed it on Friday, and this book is amazing. I've enjoyed it. It's a great read from beginning to end. There are different chapters that are definitely page turners in this. I'm going to kind of go over everything that I like about the book. I'll also go over some dislikes, and then I'll just give my overall impression or score on the book after that. So kind of want to start with exactly just how open and honest that Morris Day is about his life. You know, this is definitely not a sugarcoat piece by any means. I mean, there are, in regards to Prince, there are some things that he's very open about. There are a few things to which I won't say guarded, but definitely respectful, you know, because you have to remember these two were best friends. You know, it wasn't just a working relationship. They've known each other since high school. They played in bands since high school, and they were definitely close friends. So there are some subjects in the book to where, yes, he is definitely, you know, like I said, being respectful, not necessarily guarded. But the areas to where he is open in regards to certain things in regards to business, to where they've fallen out, some personal issues, even where Morris Day admits, you know, even his own drug use at the time was sort of the catalyst for some of that separation as well. Yeah, he definitely wasn't afraid to speak his mind about his troubles in regards to the drug use, his home life, and even, you know, just growing up. You know, he paints a very good picture of his childhood. There's a lot where he takes you there. You know, you're either feel like you're in the room, you know, whether it's with his childhood, whether it's, you know, being in the studio with Prince. He definitely just takes you on that journey. It's a very great reflection throughout. So, you know, living through those experiences, he gives a really great perspective on that. And one of the things I learned too, he's definitely a music fan. You know, I mean, of course, you know, musician, you know, but he's definitely not one of those where it's just all about just, you know, his music. Just like Prince, you know, he looked up to the greats. You know, of course, obviously there was the James Brown influence. There's the Tower of Power influence, with especially not only with him, but just a lot of those musicians in Minneapolis at that time. But, you know, definitely a music fan. I mean, he speaks well of, you know, drummers across the board, music across the board, jazz, mostly his fusion influences. Really great insights. One thing I enjoyed too was how fascinated he was with the band Grand Central, and that was the band that Prince started with Andre Simone, and just the reputation they were gaining even at that early age. One of my favorite parts was just hearing Morris talk about, or reading about what Morris was talking about when they were on stage, and just their set list alone. So they were calling out Santana songs or Sly and the Family Stone and things of that nature. And that was the thing that hooked him to where he wanted to be a part of that band. And even his audition process, where, Andre was more the kind of open person in that group. Everybody was, just amazed at what Morris was doing on drums, and how Prince was, didn't really give a reaction, but would just continue to call out different songs, funkadelic songs, and other things in that, I guess, their repertoire at that time, and Morris's ability and talent to keep up. And it was pretty telling that wasn't what Prince was saying, but what he didn't say. And just the acceptance was in the fact that, where Andre told him, well, if he didn't like what you were doing, he wouldn't have kept calling out songs. So, that was pretty much, you don't get those nuances in other Prince biographies or anything like that. So it was good to kind of see someone that was there on the inside to kind of give a picture of what it was like to, first seeing them as youngsters playing, and then to actually be a part of that band. I noticed, like, throughout most of it, the fascinating thing, because we know, Morris Day was an image, that Prince created. I mean, I know Morris Day is his real name, but just the image of Morris Day as leader of the time. There's a lot of Morris that's there in that, persona, but a lot of it was based on, what Prince was imagining as well. So getting sort of the separation between man and legend in regards to Morris Day, it was great to get a lot of those insights as well. Also, too, the greater depth of Prince and Morris as collaborators. Once Prince became famous, again, where prior to that, Morris was a drummer, and I mean a great drummer, and who knows, in another universe, could have been a part of an ensemble to where he would be one of, mentioned in the same breath as, whether it's Buddy Miles or Buddy Rich, whether it's, Ringo or John Bonham or, whoever, but that sort of transition from drummer to lead singer, and having to balance that, being that persona and maintaining that, as your entertainment, as a performer's lifestyle, and the thing that's bringing, that's paying the bills and all of that, versus the person that you are, so it was really, really amazing to get those insights from it. So that's one of the things that I take away as a positive for this book. But also, too, is Prince and Morris as collaborators. Again, you're now taken literally into the studio on how they created all those songs for the time, and even songs that there's where he's actually played on Controversy and Let's Work. Now, I knew about Let's Work, and that was based on an interview that Prince did around 2004 on that. So I knew he played drums on that, but I didn't know that Morris played on Controversy. And I also didn't know that Morris played drums on New Power Generation. And there's a lot of songs that are in the vault. There could be an album of at least maybe 6 or 7 songs that was done. When was that? Early 2000s, I believe. That, it was material they were working on. Now, what stage of completion it reached is unknown. But there's that. There's also talk of the corporate world album, which is one that had been circulating in the bootleg circuit. But that's one of the ones in the vault that a lot of fans are anxious to get to. But again, it was just amazing to be taken into the studio and, giving a picture painted of that, the way that they collaborated. And, it kind of amplifies what I felt, or things that I've read in other books about that collaboration, where it was, you kind of feel like, yeah, Prince did write a lot of those songs, but it was more of a collaboration, at least as far as maybe the groove is concerned, or maybe a few of those they did work on the concept. And, it's discussed in the book that sort of right around Ice Cream Castle's time, as the drug use, became more prevalent, that, Prince was sort of the, soul driving force of that particular album. Moore still had his input, but not as great as, say, the previous albums were. So that was a fascinating look into that period as well. Another thing that I like is the sort of analysis throughout the book that he gives of Prince, not only as a friend, but also to maybe an analysis of maybe some of his motivations, just driven by the closeness. We all have a best friend or two, to where, a lot of times, depending on where you are, you could be miles apart. You could be separated just by, scheduling. You're not as available as you were, say, when you were teenagers or college age, or, whenever that sort of golden period, to where everyone's hanging out all the time. But, there's things that you just know, and that's just based on that bond of closeness. And those are reflections, that only a best friend can speak about, or in this case, even write about with those. So, there's that sort of insight that you get from somebody close that you weren't really able to get, sometimes in a lot of interviews, a lot of interviews with a lot of the other sort of friends, or proteges or whoever in that sort of Prince world. It's the interview, so in interviews, you're sort of always on. And if a journalist is really good at what they do, they can kind of get things out of you to where you kind of get a little more insight. But in those cases, it's usually centered around one particular question, and you sort of get that one little paragraph of an answer that kind of draws you in a little deeper and kind of gives you a deeper understanding of that person, or in this case, Prince. But when you have somebody that close and they're writing a book, then you start to kind of get some insights based on that person's perspective. So just seeing Morris's perspective and getting a real open and honest analysis or reflection or commentary on even the eras of Prince that weren't necessarily, where he wasn't in the room, he wasn't there, but he knows Prince's songwriting process. So he's able to take a lyric of a song and understand it and know where he was going with it, where the rest of us, just as fans, we kind of speculate as to what's going on. So that was a pretty fascinating thing that I take away from the book on that one. So now the big thing, I know when the preview pages were released, there was a lot of talk, social media, regarding the sort of co-collaboration with Prince on this, to where, the book was sort of, Prince from the spirit world. I do like Michael Dean's analogy of Force Ghost Prince. I like that. So, but there was a lot of talk about that sort of being through that sort of conversation between Morris Day and sort of what Prince would have said if he was sitting in the room as Morris was writing this book, where that would have been taken as a bit of a distraction or something that wouldn't work. But for me, it works. Overall, it does work. I do believe that the Prince narration, it fleshes out a lot of the key moments between the two. And it also helps Morris explain his observations about those moments. So to me, it wasn't necessarily a distraction. Now we'll get in sort of where maybe some of it, I'll get into that with the dislikes a little later. But overall, for me, like I said, it did help flesh out the key moments. It did move a lot of the narrative along. So to me, I thought it was a brilliant idea. Even reading the preview pages, yeah, that made me even more fascinated to want to get the book, even though, yeah, I knew I was going to get it anyway. It's Morris Day. This is a book that I don't think we would have ever dreamed of, and especially in Prince's lifetime, we would never see books like this exist. Unfortunately, with the circumstances, it's unfortunate a book like this exists in the way that we're reading it. But we do have it. And like I said, it does give us a lot more insight, not only into Morris Day, but with Prince. And also, too, the other thing that I liked was that it filled in the gaps of what happened between, say, after the Purple Rain era and Graffiti Bridge era with Morris. Me at the time, let's see, we're talking like 85, so I was about 19 or so, trying to do things musically myself. But as being also a fan of music and having people like Morris Day, Prince, The Time, other artists as influences, we were always of course reading whatever articles in music magazines that we can find. And of course, the drug use with Morris Day was something that was pretty well known. And just the fact that, we do get to see him later, whether it was with his solo records, being in Graffiti Bridge, Pandemonium album, different TV shows and films, of course we know he turned out okay. But, like I said, for him discussing rehab, I champion the fact that he survived it, and of course it wasn't easy. Also, too, there's things that he discusses about family, which I didn't know that he had divorced and remarried. I thought he was still married to the same woman, which was Judy, which was one of his background singers back during the Color of Success era. So that was pretty much an eye-opener from there as well. Even the post-Graffiti Bridge era, too. The circumstances that led him sort of getting a new version of The Time and going on the road, and that's the thing that pretty much salvaged his career. After, again, like I said, separating Morris Day, the persona, versus Morris Day, the human being. That definitely was not an easy thing to sort out. It took a lot of years to work through that and get to a place to where, he's found a semblance of balance in his life and career. So learning about those things also, too, were some of the pluses in reading this book. Now, some of the dislikes for the book that I have, and these are not major things. Like I said, I love the book. I encourage everybody to go out and buy the book and read it. You will not be disappointed. But yeah, there are some things that, I would have probably like to have seen done better or added to it. In this particular case, one of my dislikes is that it's shorter than what I expected. Like I said, there's some items in here, some of which I'll get to a little bit later, that maybe could have been expanded on a little bit. I know closer to the end of it, because he was able to find that balance, then there really wasn't a lot. There wasn't, any, there wasn't any drama, I would think, sort of those years where in between the musicology tour and then him and Prince in their final conversation together. There wasn't a lot that I would say that was going on, really. It was just, we've all seen him and the time perform. It's always a great show. So, I mean, when life is going good, of course, there's no more drama. There's nothing else to tell. So by sort of having that sort of space in the years, I guess is probably one of the reasons why the book was short. To me, the co-narration was a bit distracting. Like I said, these dislikes, like I said, they're not heavy put downs of the book. Like I said, just little nuances of things that I've noticed. But like I said, the book is great overall. But like I said, the co-narration with, Prince from the spirit world was a little distracting. Not a lot. Not probably as much as I feared. But in the places where it was distracting, it was noticed. But the plus to it, though, was that Morris was able to bring back the focus. So, as I said, with the likes that I have for it, was that narration, it did help fill in some gaps, and it did help move the narrative. And it helped Morris to fill in those gaps and move the narrative forward as well. So, to where you're reading it and you start to get a little distracted, either in his response or his continuation of that particular tale, then it brings you back in. He's able to express himself to where you're drawn in, and I think that's one of the things for me. Like I said, going back to the book being shorter than I expected, it was like, man, I want to hear more. And it did get a little slow towards the end, which I've already discussed. And maybe some of that was due to the non-communication with Prince. And again, with Morris's life going pretty well at that point. So I guess the sharp contrast with this newer version of the time, it's, the sort of, number one, the newer lineup of the time is definitely not the original 7, but that's not a negative. But that being said, with the original 7, there's that sort of early period that you have with all entertainers and mostly bands, to where, those early tours, those early records, there's a lot of adventures. And then there's kind of a leveling off period, and, either one way or the other after that. But I guess, like I said, when things are going well, there's really nothing interesting that you can really tell, as far as the book is concerned. You're just enjoying life. You're playing well, you're making money, you're eating well, you're living well. So, then that's a good thing. But when you're writing a book, then, like I said, just having that gap was pretty noticeable just in between those years for me. The big one to me, and this just might be a personal thing with me, but I felt like the time in regards to the original 7, which would be, Jesse Johnson, Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis, of course, Monty Moore and Jelly Bean still tour with Morris. and Jerome. So the original 7, to me at times it felt like they were a footnote in the book. But again, not too heavy of a criticism. This is a book about Morris Day. This is not a book about the time. So I don't know if any one of us should spearhead that book or, take it upon ourselves to try to tackle that book and try to write that book and research it and interview everybody and have everybody's voice as a part of that book. But that's a different story for a different time. But this is a Morris Day book, and it is about Morris Day. So remember that, folks. But like I said, again, the dislikes aren't so huge to where it takes away from the book. Again, this is a great book. Go out and get it, and you will enjoy it. But this, like I said, just for me, it did feel like that they were a footnote. And I would have loved to have heard more stories, especially, some of the touring stories, because I hear a lot of those stories are legendary. And I'm hoping one day either somebody makes a movie, and maybe that could be it. Maybe there's, maybe he's saving that for the movie rights, or, maybe the time is the original 7. If they don't reunite for another album at some point, which I'm kind of doubting at this stage, but if they all agree to say, okay, let's have the band's rights made into a movie, or if somebody else is doing a book about the band itself and all 7 of them are involved in that book, then, maybe there's, so maybe he's left that out on purpose. So I'm hoping that's the case. That's my book wish list for the time on that one. But yeah, I would have liked to have heard more stories. And like I said, even if you're saving the stories, and then too, maybe some of the stories are also key for even deeper insights to his friendships with Jam and Lewis and Jesse and Jerome and, Monty and Jelly Bean. So maybe some of those insights are tied to those stories that we did not get in this book. And like I said, hopefully maybe they'll come out in a movie, or maybe they'll come out in somebody else's book or something like that. So those are, like I said, sort of my dislikes. But again, I can't stress enough just how much I enjoyed reading this book. It was great book. Actually, I may thumb through this and read it cover to cover a few more times soon. I enjoyed it a lot. I recommend that you guys go get it. If you don't have it already, by all means, go get it. If you have it and you've read it, like I said, there's a couple of podcasts that are out that have given their reviews. So I'm looking forward to jumping over to, say, the Prince podcast, the Michael Dean show, and Violet Reality. I'm looking forward to jumping on their sites and hearing their thoughts about the book as well. So, but if you haven't read it, by all means, read it. If you're halfway through it, like I said, I hope you're not listening right now. I hope you kind of hit the pause button and then finish the book and then come back. So, it's great. So I would say, if I was to give it a rating, I would say I would give it like maybe an 8.5. And the reason I give it an 8.5, and it's just due to just the length. And like I said, for me personally, a little more on the time itself, a little more about that band, as opposed to, like I said, maybe sacrificing some of that co-narration with Prince and, really reflecting on some stories on the time. But other than that, it's amazing. So also, let me know what you guys think. For everybody that's read it and has listened to my thoughts on it, leave me a comment and let me know what's going on. Let me know what you think. So that's going to end our on-time spoiler review. Be sure to listen to Amari Purple Talk on your favorite podcast platform. I've been trying to get newer episodes on YouTube as well. Varying degrees of satisfaction on my part. So I want to try to make it better for YouTube. But by all means, listen to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. And we will see you soon. So keep it purple and on the one.